All right. Welcome to the Southwick Report. I am your host, TJ Southwick, and I hope you're having a good morning. Uh, we've got some news today. So, I'm not sure how many of you have been listening to what's going on in Iran. Because, quite frankly, there is a lot of stuff going on. Specifically, the Strait of Hormuz has been completely shut down. I'm sure most of you have already seen that from Twitter. They've started bombing oil tankers that are coming through the strait. And now, because of it, uh, they, uh, they committed the cardinal sin. They raised the gas prices. Which, if you know anything about U.S. history, there's only two things that you have to do in order for us to go completely apeshit on you. And that is, fuck with America's boats and raise gas prices. Raising gas prices is the more modern version of it, but that is one of them. However, I want to start out by... I want to start out by pulling up this clip here. And it is from antiwar.com. It's talking about the new Ayatollah who just came in and is taking control. He's filling in for his recently deceased father. And his father, he was more moderate in the government. He was more of the person where he said that the government was not going to have nukes because he felt it was not in their religion or something like that to have them. So in most circumstances, he was the moderate of that regime. His son is not the most moderate. However, given some recent strikes that the U.S. has had, like, for instance, a school that we've bombed where we killed 150 girls. Was it just girls? Yeah, 150 schoolgirls. Here, pull up the clip real quick. Alright, move over. Zoom this up. Oh, shit. God damn it. Alright, there we go. It's looking more and more like the U.S. Navy was responsible for killing more than 150 schoolgirls in the first hours of Operation Epic Fury. According to separate analyses of new video performed by research firm Bellingcat and the New York Times, who each tapped weapons experts to study the footage, their conclusions contradict President Trump's casual accusations that inaccurate Iranian weapons were to blame. Which we kind of already knew. Anything that Trump is saying right now is most likely not accurate. It's most likely not accurate that only eight soldiers have died in this war on the U.S. side. There's more likely far more than 8. But we're probably never going to know that. How long did it take for them to release the casualty numbers for the Iraq War? It's going to take a long time before any administration releases the numbers for this one. And that's kind of why I say we need to end it now. We need to pull out. We need to accept defeat. And we need to and we need to talk to the Ayatollah. That's not going to go over well, though. Because, I mean, we just killed his father. You really think he's just going to take whatever offer we give him? Because, I mean, here's what he said about it. All right, in his first statement, the Ayatollah said, pull up the clip here, certainly the leverage of blocking the Strait of Hormuz must also continue to be used, Khamenei said in his message, which is issued as a written statement and read on Iranian TV. He suggested that Iran could open, quote-unquote, other fronts in the war and vowed there would be revenge for Iranians who have been killed, including more than 100 girls and boys who were killed by a U.S. strike on an elementary school in the opening hours of the war. The retaliation we have in mind is not only related to the martyrdom of the great leader of the revolution, rather every member of the nation who was killed by the enemy becomes a separate case in the file of retaliation, Khamenei said. Which, if you know anything about Iranian demographics, yes, there is a strong Shia population in Iran, but it is only 40% Muslim. There's only 40% of the nation is a Muslim nation. Everyone else is a different ethnicity or a different religion. But yet, people still believe that we are out to kill Islamic terrorists. They don't make up a high population. Most of the people in that country are victims. And if you really want to talk about overthrowing a radical Islamic regime, look at Saudi Arabia. They are far worse than Iran, and they came in under their own power. This Iranian regime, we instated. You really think us going in and overthrowing them is actually going to make them go away? No, it's going to make a new and even worse regime come in. When are people going to wake up to this? This is why we need to pull out of the Middle East. We need to let them heal. We need to let the wounds heal over time. What happened after the American Revolution and the War of 1812? We left Britain alone. And over the next 2 decades, when John Quincy Adams came into the presidency, there was good relations. When you leave a country by itself and you allow them to grow on their own, you can create peace and prosperity there. Instead, what you are doing is you are extending forever wars, which we knew was going to happen. I mean, the military-industrial complex has its branches out everywhere. Sorry, I just hit my microphone. Ultimately, what we need, as I said, leave them be, and things will heal on their own. However, that is all I'm going to say about that, because there is a pretty large and pretty major factor that's going to be played in the future coming of this war, and that is the cost of it. Because I'm going to pull up the page here, but this war is getting expensive. Where is it? Yep, it's actually even more expensive than the last time I checked. Here, it was at nearly 7 days ago. It is now 19 billion. And it's just going to keep going up. I mean, the cost of the Iraq War was roughly 200 billion, maybe even more than that. And don't even bother looking at the Treasury reports, because you can pull up monthly Treasury reports of how much the U.S. government is spending. They only show the budget options. They don't show you what is being spent here. And on those monthly reports, they're showing a deficit of roughly $600 billion. What do you think they're factoring in here? How do you think they're paying for this? They're devaluing the currency through inflation to make your dollar less valuable and to allow them to keep making more valuable currency. Time we wake up to this. We need to decentralize the banks, we need to end the Federal Reserve, and we need to free the markets. Unless we do that, we are going to be stuck in an empire that is going to go bankrupt and collapse. And now that we've covered that, we need to discuss another thing. Because as I mentioned before about the rising gas prices. Prices of oil have doubled. They're roughly at about $100 a barrel now. That doesn't sound right. I'm going to check that. Okay, almost 100. Here, I'm going to pull it up. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Crude oil, $98 a barrel. So I wasn't entirely far off. Clearly showing that this war is the sole responsible factor when it comes to the rising gas prices. I'm sure you all knew that already. This is pretty stupid for me to have to say, but it needs to be said because it is showing that we are it is showing that we are going to need to look for new sources of energy. And if we had free markets, these sources would have already been found out. Because right around the start of the millennium, we were already on the verge of making it to full nuclear. Nuclear by far is the best form of energy out there. It is the safest, it is the cleanest, and it is the most power efficient. It creates the most power from a single gram of uranium or plutonium. And yet we don't use it. Because after Chernobyl, after 3 Mile Island, not after Fukushima, but after those two, we heavily regulated the industry to the point where it became way too expensive to build a reactor. And now we are stuck in the Stone Age, essentially. We are stuck in the Stone Age of energy when oil is not as valuable, is not as profitable, but yet it is still getting backed by the government. And it's very possible it is just the oil execs or the coal execs going to the government and saying, hey, this form of energy here, it's going to cause us to go out of business. We need you to take care of it. Because that's what happens. Whenever a monopoly wants to form, they go to the government and they get the government to smash down on it. If you had free market economics and you had a sound currency, we wouldn't have this issue. In fact, the markets would be in the favor of the consumer as well as the producer. It will adapt to whose needs are most important at the time. That when you let interest rates fluctuate, when you let prices fluctuate on their own, it works out for both parties. However, when the government gets involved, and when you try to centrally plan every part of the economy, it never works in your favor. Because Humans do not have the mental capacity to be able to handle the fluctuation of prices and scarce resources. Another way to see that, look at the value of the dollar. In fact, let's go back to trading economics real quick. So while gold and silver have dropped quite a decent bit right now, they are still heavily valuable right now. Gold being at 5,000 and silver being at 80. These were at one point 52 and 98. So it is dropping a little bit. All precious metals do. All forms of material drop in value. But the fact of the matter is that gold and silver are still far more stable than any other form of currency we have out there. Right now, we've got a Federal Reserve that uses dollars that aren't backed by anything and prints off as much as they want to do whatever they want. How do we fix that? We need to go back to the principles listed in the Constitution, and we need to have only gold and silver as legal tenure. And we need to make sure that we use those as our form of backing when it comes to economics and when it comes to monetary policy, because that is going to create a system where only the most valuable of minerals is going to be used as something that everyone is willing to trade for. And I will say right now, with gold dropping, probably time to start looking to invest. And I don't mean invest in the stock market or anything. No, buy precious metals. I'm more than likely going to be contacting Birch Gold after this. Maybe do the same, because the U.S. government, the U.S. economy, it's not lasting long. It is going to go bankrupt, and we're all going to pay the price for it. So, do with that as you wish. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you